Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Current Radio, News Talk 1180 for the best in Saturday Talk Radio at 1 o'clock, and again on 1230 KGEO at 10 o'clock Saturday. For the best in Wednesday Talk Radio, we're also on 1410 KERI at 1 o'clock on Wednesday, and now on 1000 KKIM in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm Marty Pay, and I'll be winging it this week without my partner Clay Kerner. He'll be back next week. And as always, behind the big board, we've got our producer, Greg Held. Hey, we had a great show last week with Catherine Anspaugh from Make-A-Wish and our old buddy Rockwell from Trouts. And then in the second half, we had Wendy Porter from the Wounded Heroes Fund. And I can't recommend these two organizations enough. They're fantastic organizations, and they do a lot for our community and for California as far as their respective clientele, and I highly recommend them both. Today we've got an exciting show. In the second half, we have my old bike riding buddy, founder of Brick, Keith Woolridge. But now by phone, we have a frequent guest to the program, Hollywood reporter and the best-selling author, James Hirsen. James, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Oh, it's great. By the way, my name is Hirsen. It rhymes with person.
You know, I always do that. I did that last time, too.
Oh, that's okay.
You know, you get kind of in a groove, and you do it wrong, and time and time again. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
I've got a couple questions before we get into that great article you just wrote, but you write for a couple of different organizations. I didn't realize that. You also write for the New York Times?
No, I don't write for the New York Times. I'm a New York Times best-selling author, is what my bio says.
Okay,
so
that's what I
misunderstood.
I've written
books that have been on the New York Times best-selling list.
Uh-huh. And you're also an attorney and a law professor.
I am.
And I read someplace that you've argued cases in front of the Supreme Court?
I have argued, when I say I've appeared, and you make an appearance in the Supreme Court sometimes just on paper, but I've been to the Supreme Court, and I've been involved in cases with friends of the court, briefs, dealing with some pretty lofty issues like religious freedom and civil rights and that sort of thing.
What's that like? I've been in that building, and if you ever get a chance to go to Washington, D.C., you have to go to the Supreme Court building. It's an impressive building. What's that like, being able to do that in front of those men? Well,
the Supreme Court, obviously it's the final arbiter of constitutional disputes and federal disputes and that sort of thing. So it's no different than any other appellate court, other than the fact that it's the most famous and that it is probably the one, more people are familiar with the Supreme Court. And, of course, the rulings have much greater effect on everyone. Everything is more formal, and, a lot of the Supreme Court actual argument and rhetoric is kabuki theater because generally either the decisions are already made or ultimately have nothing or very little to do with the oral argument. It has much more to do with the written briefs. And the clerks, they're called clerks, which sounds very lowly, but that's not the case. The trusted confidants of all 9 justices are extremely critical in how a case gets decided. But because it's an appellate court and because it's the Supreme Court, it's focused on the law. People have a misunderstanding of what court of appeals do. They focus on legal issues only, not retrying the case, not the facts of the case. And so it's critical, and we've seen how much the court, because an activist court which can essentially legislate from the bench, and it's very, very critical what happens in that building. And especially lately, there's been cases where the justices are splitting in a different way, and they're dealing with subjects that relate to the headlines, that relate to privacy and surveillance. And so I think more of that obviously is going to come before the court and it's going to be very critical to the future of the country.
Yeah, especially in the next 10 years, because, depending upon who's elected in 2016, I think they'll be making a couple of vacancies in the Supreme Court.
Well, of course, yeah.
So, yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. It's interesting, James. I read a lot of your material. I'm going to be teaching a class up here at a university on media's effect on society, so that's right up your alley. So a lot of your stuff is right on key for something that I'm going to be doing shortly.
Oh, good. Yeah, I've taught a similar course to that, and it's it's great. And the greatest way to learn is to teach.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, I think the media is always underestimated. People always focus more on the news media, but I think when we look at the media as a seamless thing, because we live in the media now, we live in it. When you put together the social media, music, now on-demand television, internet television, movies, you put all of that together. It's so utterly powerful for shaping attitudes and beliefs and society's future that, I think it's a great course to teach, and it's almost infinite.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Our guest by phone, Hollywood reporter and author, James Hirsen. Well, speaking of articles and speaking of the media, you wrote a great article recently that, it's funny, I'm a child of the 60s. I remember growing up on Superman, but I never thought of it this way until I read your article, and it kind of opened up a few things for me. The article was called Man of Steel, Cloaked in Christian Metaphors. I thought that was fascinating. Explain how you came to that conclusion.
Well, I'm talking about the movie that now is the number one movie in the world. It came out on Father's Day weekend. It's grossed more than $250 million at this juncture. Is going to go.
Wow.
It may be the biggest film of the summer. It is the biggest film of the summer so far. It may end up being. It certainly will be in the top 3 or 5 this year, if not number one. And so, it really brought out explicitly what was already in the Superman origin story, and that is these Christian themes. Christopher Nolan, who was responsible for directing the Dark Knight trilogy and the prime mover on that, is a person that obviously has already established a track record where he takes comic book superheroes and transforms them into Shakespearean characters of depth, and that's what he did with the origin story of Superman. And he and his collaborators, Zack Snyder, who directed 300, and his writer, David Goyer, have done interviews and said, look, we noticed, here's this origin story. There's a father from afar who sends his son to Earth, who can save humanity, and he has these extraordinary powers. And he said, we noticed the Christian themes, and said, why hide from it? Let's go ahead and use them and make them even more explicit. So they have Russell Crowe playing Jor-El, the natural father of Superman, on the planet Krypton when he's launching his son to Earth, talking about how he will save humanity, how he has these powers on Earth, and how he will be, quote, like a god to them. That's a line in the theme. Superman is an infant. Kal-El lands in Smallville, Kansas, in a little baby-sized spaceship discovered by Jonathan and Martha Kent, played by Kevin Costner and Diane Lane, all-star cast again. And they take the little spaceship, which looks like a cradle, and put it in the stable, which makes you think of the manger. As Clark is growing up, he's different from other kids. He's picked on. He's taunted. He has to hide his real identity. He turns to his father and he says, asks a question. It's played by Kevin Costner. He says, did God do this to me? And Kevin Costner's character responds in a line that sounds like it was written by Pastor Rick Warren. He says, somewhere out there you have another father, and he sent you here for a reason, purpose-driven life. He doesn't say that. And then the film, Superman's age during most of the film when he's an adult is 33 years old, no accident, the same age of Jesus when he reached the height of his ministry and was crucified. When he's walking the earth, Clark gets visited by his real father in the form of a spirit. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
And perhaps there's an image of Superman. He's plunging to earth in a battle scene. He's got his arms outstretched, and he looks kind of like a superhero crucifix. So, it's gracefully woven into a really great popcorn film. And so what happened is parents took their kids on the weekend, and some of the kids noticed that the main character of the film was willing to sacrifice his life for the world. And they asked questions about that, and somehow ends up relating to their Sunday worship. So not a bad thing.
Amazing. I know you're short of time, so we're going to keep you just for one segment, okay? Because I know you've got another appointment this morning. But or actually, let's do a short segment. We're going to keep you a little bit. Okay, we'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio News Talk 1180.